Right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of the All Things Black podcast. This is a live video cast, and it's the third installment of a series that I did with dear brother Afiel Levi of the Forefront Express, and he has his own podcast. We've introduced him several times, so I mean, there's really no more to introduce at this point. But what we want to do is we want to finalize the series, and again, like I said, this is the third part. We want to put an ending to the series of what does God want us to bring to the table. Like we started out with the first two topics or the first two podcasts, and we kind of noted that a lot of people are having a conversation centered around what do you bring to the table? What does this individual bring to the table? And we did come to the agreement and conclusion that for the most part, a lot of people are talking about very materialistic things. They don't talk about character. They don't talk about anything substantive other than the material items, right? So we've been pretty much locked into this gender war, right? This, female versus male type of war, right? That has been going on for quite some time. And I think that what he and I are discussing is really the culmination of a question that's been put out in the atmosphere, in the social media atmosphere, for a lot of people to partake of. And we are just at the point now where we should really be asking the Most High or the Creator, what do you want us to bring to the table? And I think that's a very serious question. And we're going to try to dissect this as best as possible. And hopefully, we'll be guided in a way by the Creator himself to give us some, to help give some really substantive information to those that would be listening to this broadcast. So again, my name is Mr. Black Ovation. I am the host and the producer of the All Things Black podcast. And I just want to welcome everybody who might be tuning in to say thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment on Apple Podcast, Spotify, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and become a subscriber of the YouTube channel. We're going to grow this channel as best as possible. And with that, I definitely want to just say thank you guys very much in advance for patronizing the podcast episodes that I already have, donating what you did donate, and sticking with me as much as possible. So again, with that being said, we're going to explore this question: what does God want us to bring to the table? The last time, right? This is the third part. This is the final part of that series, and I'm going to have that discussion with our dear brother Afiel Levi. Brother Levi, do you want to say a few words before we start the discussion?
Yeah, sure. Peace and blessings to you all. Shalom, Most High in Christ bless. I'm Afiel Levi, the host of the Forefront Radio. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to have me on the show to discuss this topic. And I give all praises to the Most High just for the opportunity to glorify Him in all that I do and all that I say and in our actions. So thank you.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Like I said, it's always been a pleasure, man, to have you on this, on my show. Like I said, I've told you that several times, for the mere fact that you can add a lot to the discussion. You have a lot of insight, a lot of biblical knowledge, stuff like that. So I think that's very great that we can sit back as men and have that discussion and dialogue and things like that. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into it. The question is, what does God want us to bring to the table? And I thought at the beginning of the program that I would make it very specific this time. I would make it gender specific. So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at that from a male perspective, right? Since we're supposed to be the leader, since God actually, the creator himself, quote unquote, created us first, right? From the dust of the earth and gave us very, very solid instructions in terms of what we're supposed to do going forward. And, just being those men that we're supposed to be from that biblical perspective and everything else. So as a man, from a biblical perspective, what does God want us as men to bring to the table? And this is before we consider family. This is before we consider anything else. What does God want us to bring to the table, right? Again, not necessarily those material items, because I believe that the material items comes after, and you can correct me on that, afterwards, right? So I think the scripture says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you." Correct. So, with that said, brother, can you kind of add to that, or give us something that will be able to lend to the conversation? So again, what does God want us to bring to the table as men? And we're going to start there. So again, it's just we're going to focus on the men.
Definitely, definitely. I want to encourage all the men, both young and old, to pay attention, take notes, write it down, analyze it, use your critical thinking skills. So I want to start off with a caveat. I always use the Bible to answer the questions. I always use the scriptures. I'll give an example of this. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, it says this: all scripture all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. So, one of the key factors of us understanding our ancestry as a nation of people is that the Most High set up the men and established us to be a nation of kings and priests. With that being said, we have to put away the carnal things we learned in this world. We have to put away the modern religion, the modern politics, the way of life that we have thought, and renew our minds back to how our ancestors taught things. For example, when Moses was on Mount Sinai, he didn't give us Baptist, he didn't give us Pentecostal, he didn't give us any of these modern religions that we see that started from slavery and move and progress now. The ancient ancestors spoke specifically for laws, statutes, and commandments from the Creator Himself. So remember, what does the Bible do for us as a nation of people? It gives us inspiration from the divine Creator. It gives us what's profitable, meaning it'll help us in the long run. It gives us doctrine. It gives us correction as men. It gives us instruction on how to be righteous. Now, check this out. Verse 17, it says, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. So now think about this. In the world, everybody say, oh, can't nobody be perfect. I ain't perfect. I make mistakes. That's not the thought process that we should have as righteous men of the Most High. Okay. He wants us to elevate ourselves to be a superior man, a high value man, a spiritual man. Watch this. These are the words of the Messiah himself in Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. He says this: be ye therefore perfect, even, meaning just like, as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. So you see, his words completely contradict the way of the world. The world tells you, oh, don't be perfect. That means be basic, be mediocre, be normal, be like the other nations. No. The Most High wants us to be strong. He wants us to be firm. He wants us to be godly. And this is the inspiration that I want to instill in the men so far. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you use the word high value, because that's a word that's actually been thrown around heavily, right? In
Hmm.
certain circles, and again, the social media and stuff like that. So high value, man, that's very interesting that you would use that word and bring that into what you just articulated to the listeners. So,
Hmm.
with that being said, so again, you said God wants us to be a high value man, right?
Hmm.
He wants us to be a high value man. In this world, high value men are so, the people, what people have been given a definition of as a high value man is a high earning man, right? High
Hmm.
earning, he has stature, he has these different things that, again, that are tangible in the world. Uh,
Hmm.
for those men that may not be able to acquire that, right? That leaves them then not having the title, quote unquote, not being able to live up to that materialistic title as a high value man. So if that's the case, then how can these men be high value men? What is it? foundationally, that these men that are not quote unquote high earners, what can they do to obtain the status of a high value man?
The definition of a high value man in westernized culture is warped because no matter how much money you have, it'll never be enough. You'll have inflation rates that keep going up and up and up. And we, as a nation of people, were never one to focus on the idolatry of money. Riches in Eastern cultures were considered your cattle, your natural resources. These were the things of value back then that could produce. Nowadays, fiat currency is not anything of much worth because if they drop a bomb over here and God forbid, if something happened over here to the United States and is wiped off the face of the earth, nobody's going to be concerned about how much dollars you have in your pocket. The country won't exist anymore. You see what I'm saying? The Most High tells you what value he wants in the scriptures. He tells you how a leader should conduct himself, or a bishop or a teacher or a man. Okay. So for example, David, King David, right? He told his son, his black son Solomon, right, who met with the Queen of Sheba, who was in Ethiopia, right? He told this man, look, in order for you to conduct yourself as a man, I'm going to show you. It's not about how much riches you can attain. It's not about how much women you can attain. To be a godly and righteous high value man is a man that follows the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Creator. Now watch this. Even in the New Testament, it describes what a leader is and how we as men should conduct ourselves. Watch this. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, write this down, young men and old men alike. Write this down. 1 Timothy chapter 3. This is a true saying, meaning out of everything that you can attain, this is factual information that's going to help you to get it right. Watch this. This is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, what is a bishop? That's a leader. That doesn't just mean a religious leader. That means someone that's in a position of authority. Okay? Watch this. It says, the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work, meaning it's a good thing for us as men to have the desire to not be mediocre, to not be basic like everybody else, to supersede the foolishness of Western society. Okay. A bishop then must be blameless, right? The husband of, watch this, one wife. One wife. So think of it like this. Back in the days when you were a CEO or a manager of a company, right? They would look into your history of your personal life. They would say, if you're a man that can be faithful and honorable with one woman, one wife, then definitely you can be faithful with this corporation, with the financial resources, with the employees, because if you're abusive, if you're alcoholic towards that woman, you'll do the same thing with the business. You'll run it into the ground. So family was a direct representation of business. It was a direct representation of culture and how you conduct yourself as a nation. You see what I'm saying? So one, you got to be the husband of one wife. Number two, you have to be vigilant. You have to be of good behavior. You have to be given to hospitality and apt to teach, not given to wine, no striker, nor given to filthy lucre. What's that going into? Not greedy of money. See, in America, the roles have flipped. Men are soft and weak. They're chasing after money. They're chasing after the lust of the flesh. And we're wondering why. Why can't we get ahead? Our value system has been skewed and turned upside down. Instead of the families of faith, family, trust, dignity, honor, respect, integrity, all these things are now flipped. Chasing money, chasing riches, jealousy, envy, strife, which is why we have so much drama in the community. You see what I'm saying? We can't chase after filthy lucre. But I know I know the
No, the
wheels are
wheels are
turning
turning.
in
Yeah,
your
yeah,
head. So go
yeah,
ahead.
definitely. The wheels are turning. So I'm listening, but that's why I wanted to make it very specific this go around and deal with a specific gender. So we're talking about the men today. What does God want us as men to bring to the table? So we kind of addressed that somewhat, early on. With again, you're talking about forms of leadership being righteous, right? Not necessarily chasing the lust of the world and the flesh and things like that. So this, I think this is very good information and very pointed because again, I believe if we as men begin to establish that righteous behavior and that substantive behavior of men, these are things that we can begin to use to correct what's going on in our own communities, right? Because we become the standard bearer at that time, right? We become the strong men like you talked about before, right? Where we're going to allow these different things to actually devalue us. And I think that's really what's happening to a lot of us as men. We're allowing these different things to devalue us. And as a result of that, every little thing that can go wrong can seep through those little chains, those little crevices, right? And then begin to break down our own community. What would you have to say about that?
That's a very true statement because, unfortunately, because of how our men have been brainwashed to pedestalize our sisters, they're leaving our women to place themselves in positions of authority over them as opposed to them standing in their rightful position as kings and priests. So now, what I want to encourage our men to do is think on these things, meditate on these things. How do we as a nation of people better ourselves? How do we stop being weak minded or allowing our authority to be usurped by our, the other gender? You see what I'm saying? Now, by authority, I don't mean a dictatorship. I don't mean anything of that nature. I mean,
Yeah,
what I'm saying is
please
godly.
clear
Yes,
that up
'cause I
because
know
yeah,
the
we don't want to
thoughts of
get to that
people.
part. Yeah, we
Right,
don't. Yeah,
because a lot of people are like, "Oh, being a godly, righteous man, oh, that's toxic masculinity." Listen, I've encountered a lot of different individuals, right? And for our sisters, they say to me constantly, "I don't want a man that's too nice to me." Sometimes a man there's nothing wrong with a man being direct, being confident, and being assertive. That's what I'm getting into. You know, using your intelligence to get the desires of what's good and what's pure. Okay. Remember last time when we talked, right? We got into Proverbs chapter 31, right? And one of the things that Lemuel's mother told him was this: Proverbs chapter 31.
you're cutting out. You're cutting out. You're cutting out. You're cutting out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay. Where did it last leave off?
From what I can remember, you talked about Lemuel.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So King Lemuel in Proverbs chapter 3, Proverbs chapter 31, verse 3, his mother told him this: Give not thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to that which destroyeth kings. For it is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. Okay, so we as men, as husbands, as fathers, part of leadership is understanding the importance of sobriety. Okay. A lot of times we like to drown our sorrows in the Black community with illicit drugs, whether it's cocaine, marijuana, alcohol. These things were given to us as a nation of people to inebriate our minds from elevating ourselves to a higher status. So part of cleaning ourselves up is getting our Black men to see, look, and not just Black men, but everybody in the diaspora, Blacks, not Latinos, Native Americans, all our people, to see the importance of getting themselves together. Okay. When we allow ourselves to get spiritually drunk by the ways of America and physically drunk by alcohol and all these things, it blocks us from that deep connection to the Creator. I'll give an example. If you're driving in the middle of the road, right? It's pitch black outside and you have lights on. What is the purpose of the light? What does it do?
Illuminates the road ahead where you can
Mhm.
see.
Exactly. Perfectly. Perfectly. You said that succinctly. It illuminates, it lights up the things. Now, watch this. The word of the Most High says the same thing. In Proverbs chapter 6, verse 23, it says this: For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light. And the law is light. So a lot of us right now, we're not operating by any laws. We don't have any divine principles on how we interact with relationships with our women, how we interact in relationship with our children, how we conduct ourselves as men on the earth. But guess what? The Most High said it ain't hard. I got a playbook right here for you called the Bible. You read that thing and it'll give you instructions on how to be a man, how to be a father, how to take care of your family resources. Okay, all these things are here in the commandments of the Most High. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I got you. As we're doing this podcast, I got a couple of people that actually reached out to me. So I'm gonna ask you a very specific question from one of those individuals. Okay. So, what does God want us to bring to the table, biblically and spiritually? Let me ask that one more time. Biblically and spiritually, what would God have us bring to the table? Because God is interested in His Word, not so much in our lifestyle, right? So, kind of address that question. So it's like, you follow me? Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Okay. What I'm showing is through the scriptures is that the importance of obedience to the Creator is what's going to direct our households aright. What does God want you to bring first initially? Watch this. In Isaiah chapter 1, verse 16, it says this: Wash you, make you clean, put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. So, the first mindset as a prince of the Most High, as a man that's going into the kingdom of heaven, is knowing, look, the ways that I've obtained in this life of seeking after material wealth, physical possession, lusting after women, drunkenness, violence, all these things are evil things that we have to first put away. And after we do that, God will enable us to have the spirit and mindset on how we can care for our nation, how we can take care of our people. It starts first from for renewing your mind. That's what you bring to the table. Not your riches, not your wealth, not anything. You come before the Creator and you say, look, I used to deal with this, this, this. I want to purge myself of these things so I can better suit my nation, that I could better help my people, that I can help my women and my children and progress as a nation of people. That's what's going to get us off of black on black crime. That's what's going to get us out of baby mama, baby daddy drama. That's what's going to get us out of the high divorce rate. We're going to stop being weak. We're going to stop saying, look, this is how our households are going to be held. Watch this. Genesis chapter 26 gives us a key point of our forefather Abraham, right? Many of the top religions on the earth look to Abraham as the father of all things. Watch how God describes Abraham. Genesis chapter 26 and verse 5. It says this: Because that Abraham obeyed my voice. What is the voice of God? This Bible, right? Abraham obeyed and listened to the voice of the Creator guiding him. Watch this. And kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. My laws. That's what you're going to bring to the table as a man. You're going to realize this instruction manual called the Bible tells us what to eat, tells us what to wear, tells us how we conduct ourselves in marriage, tells us how we build up our relationships with our family. All these things can be found in this Black history book known as the Bible. This is the answer to your question.
But
What we bring to the table.
yeah, definitely. But one of the things that I think some people may have an issue with is the fact that some of that again still seems as though it's restrictive, and again, it kind of does supposed to be restrictive, right? I believe the Bible does say, broad is the road that leads to destruction, and narrow is the road that leads to salvation. So yeah, you're going to be restricted in a ton of ways, but at the same time, you don't want to get to a point where it's legalistic and not really internalized. So again, you want to make sure that what we're talking about is something that is internalized, right? So we can actually move accordingly with that spirit. So yeah, so if you are in a place where you can literally begin to hear the voice of God to direct your steps, that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of, what does God want us to bring to the table in terms of leadership with men? Because we got to be in a place where we're humble enough and submissive enough, which is another key word, as men to be able to be directed, because we're not going to be in a place where we can actually lead if we cannot be directed ourselves. I believe militarily, or even in places of work, in order for you to be able to excel, you first have to humble yourself and get under somebody else. Is that correct? You got to get under somebody else's tutelage, or have someone to teach you. So except you become as a little child, correct? And men have to learn how to do that, because sometimes our ego can get in the way of true leadership. And that leadership, again, is the only leadership that's in town, and that's the leadership from God Himself. So that's why I said I really wanted to make this very specific for a very specific reason, because if the leadership is supposed to be God, man, and so forth, right? And it's supposed to trickle down, so to speak. Then we have to begin as men to begin to try our best to align ourselves with these different principles and the different things that we're supposed to be doing. That way, we can try to find a way to begin to fix what's ailing our community. So I'll let you go ahead and speak on that.
I agree wholeheartedly. The reason why I say that is because right now we are literally in spiritual warfare. We're fighting for the lives of our people. We're fighting for our wives. We're fighting for our children. We're fighting for our people to get to a higher state of being. So, part of that is understanding the love that we should have for one another, right? Christ Himself said, "If you love me, keep my commandments." Now, as a king in his kingdom, he's instructing the warriors how to operate in the correct thought process. Love is an action word. Love is not just speaking it out of our words and our rhetoric, but actually showing it by what we do, right? So understanding that we're in warfare, part of that warfare is putting away the entanglements of this world and fighting against it. Um, Watch this. In Second Timothy chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier." As a good soldier. So part of what a soldier does is get training, right? You start off with the basic training. You start off with that instruction manual that they give you, the handouts, and then they start putting you through drills and steps that you need to take in order to be firm. So now imagine that the Bible is that drill manual, right? That a soldier will use in order to learn how to go to war. Most people, believe it or not, have not read the Bible in its entirety. They think it's just a fairy tale book. But when you actually read and examine it and you find out that it's a Black history book, you're like, hold up, this is talking about me. And you're realizing what our ancestors got wrong and how we could get it right. So part of that now is enduring hardness. Part of that now is being firm, being strong and collective, and saying, you know what, no matter what that happens to me, I'm going to still stand firm as a man and hold on to these divine principles in order to help my people. So watch in verse 4 what it says. "No man that warreth," meaning nobody that goes to war, "entangles himself with the affairs of this life." Think about that. Consider that deep in the recesses of your mind. If I'm a general of a vast army and I'm instructing the men to say, okay, look, we're going to go in this direction and we're going to do A, B, C. I can't then turn as a leader and say, well, let me turn my head away from what I'm instructing the men to do and involve myself and entangle myself with another affair. We're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to do that. So, how can we apply that in our personal lives? Let's use relationships, for example. A man is not going to involve himself in a position where he's guiding his household and gets distracted by an affair with another woman. They call it quote unquote entanglements nowadays. I don't know what the hell that means. That just means adultery to me. But they'll go and turn away from establishing their own seed, their own bloodline, to dip and dab and jump around. And no, that's not how we're supposed to conduct. We're in spiritual warfare. So if you know as a fact that the institutions that we live under are purposing to destroy our families, not to get into any specifics, I don't want to name no names, but we know that the higher powers that be have used their resources and energy to destroy our families. Now we got to say, look, what was it that they were putting in front of me to block me from being able to take care of my family? Think about during the 1960s, right? What came that distracted us away from our families? The drugs, right? They start sprinkles of white women on them, right? The infidelity, the whoredom, right? They started sending letters back and forth to religious leaders, causing them to, fight amongst themselves, and political leaders, whether it's the Black Panther Party, whether it's, all these organizations, right? To diminish them from the goal of taking care of their families, their
Yeah,
wives and their children.
all of the things that would definitely be able to distract a man and a someone that is a leader, right, from the goal of liberation. So definitely, you mentioned the drugs. You mentioned bringing in some of the women, right? You mentioned a ton of things that actually you know again took men off of the path of trying to be men and trying to be great leaders in their own community. So yeah, I totally understand that, but we're at a time now where that is at an all-time high. So I agree with you with the spiritual warfare. So again, it's incumbent upon us as men to try our best to try, first of all, to try to keep each other in line, right? I do wholeheartedly agree with that. So when you see your brother out of order, you mentioned something like I see a lot of young men walking around with pants and their pants down and stuff like that. I mentioned to them, and I won't be like harsh about it, but I will be stern about that and what that creates, what kind of imagery that creates, what kind of perception that creates, things like that, right? That's minor in a sense. But again, all of us as men need that correction, and we need to be corralled as men, right, with each other, put in that group as men as each other to try to keep each other on the straight and narrow. I think that's a big portion that's missing among a lot of us, right? Where we don't mind stepping on your brother's toes. Like, listen, man, you're out of order right now, and there's too many of us that are allowing other men, and some, for the most part, including ourselves, to get away with things that we shouldn't be able to get away with. This is a society of hyper individualism where people feel like that this is me. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm not necessarily tied to the collective. So yeah, so that definitely needs to be straightened out. But again, that's why we asked the question on this particular subject: what does God want us to bring to the table? And we wanted to do. I wanted to end with the men. There's not going to be any sisters or anything like that. We're talking about us as men because the burden, not I guess I shouldn't say burden, but we're supposed to be the one that's shouldering the community at large, doing the heavy lifting, doing the things that are necessary to keep our community intact and in order. And I think one of the things that is definitely missing is the fact that we as men, since you mentioned spiritual warfare, I don't think we really understand the level of warfare that we're under as men, as black men. I don't think we really understand the level of warfare that we're under. Because if we did, I think we would actually come together and start to understand that business is warfare, and we would start to understand that we need to start developing businesses and start to do trade and international commerce and things like that. and just start to spend our money within our own group. Because again, business is warfare. So if we're not creating businesses and institutions and things like that for our children and our wives to partake in, we're still losing the battle. So yeah, we can have everything that we're talking about now, but if we don't put that into practice, right, practical application, and do the things that are necessary that a lot of other men are doing in their own community, we're still missing out.
Hey, that's a real statement too, and I consider the fact that with that being said, a lot of us, instead of trying to work collectively, we in turn, like you just mentioned, had that individualistic mindset of not trying to deal and reach out to the diaspora in our communities, like the people of the west coast of Africa, where many of us known that the slave ships came from, whether it's Angola, whether it's Ghana. A lot of us don't decide to say, hey, let's go back to those places and create businesses there, as opposed to, and also here we still have that divide and conquer mindset where we think we're different groups, whether it's Panamanian, African American, Jamaican, Haitian. We don't see ourselves as a collective. We don't see ourselves as the lost tribes of Israel that the Bible speaks of. So that's going into what we mentioned in previous episodes about knowing who we are as a nation of people, and then into this particular topic of cleaning our men up and getting them to see that the systems that we live under purposed to introduce the drugs in our community, the promiscuity, the foolishness that many of our men fall into, that end up destroying us. Which is why I went earlier to the office of a leader. What does a leader do? A leader keeps his mind sober. A leader is not a striker or a brawler. A leader is quick to instruct and apt to teach. But in order to teach others, we have to humble ourselves and learn again. We have to renew our mind. That's the whole part about being born again. People think being born again is just you splash yourself with some water and wop babaloo bop, you're good. No, that's not how it is. We're supposed to renew our minds daily. We're supposed to fill our minds with spiritual thoughts daily that will guide us. Okay, I want to start a business. How can I incorporate my people in the process? Okay, if I know for a fact that I can build trust amongst brothers, right? I will deal with a righteous man that says, if I drop $1,000 right in front of your face, you have the mindset to say, I know the Bible says thou shalt not steal. I'm not going to take from my brother. I could literally drop a stack right in front of somebody. He's not even going to blink at it. But that goes into discipline of the mind. You see what I'm saying? If I'm a leader of a organization, right, and I know that the government structures that we are under try to place women in the group to dissuade us from our objectives, I'm going to say, you know what? I have one wife. I'm not going to go off and commit adultery with another woman. I'm not going to bring shame to myself or the organization I'm dealing with, so that way they can't diminish our objectives. All these things relate to us being sober minded, renewing our mind, being born again, and working together as a collective. That's how we bring ourselves to the table of being strong, righteous men.
Got you. So, in essence, well, let me say this part. Yeah, that's exactly the direction I wanted you to go and begin to talk about. But yes, there is a scripture that says, "If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face," right? Which is a big thing. And that's the other thing about it too, is that in this world, that we currently live in, that is not a thing that is, like, how can I say it? That's not a thing that seems to be like very heavily promoted, because again, you're talking about different generations. You're talking about following the bag. You're talking about getting the purse. You're talking about everything else that kind of, like you mentioned earlier, takes us off of that square, takes us off that direction. So, can you kind of expound upon that particular verse
Yeah,
and
definitely.
what that means in relationship to us as men.
Yeah, definitely. So that particular scripture, I'm glad you quoted it because it popped into my head right when you said it. It's Second Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. For all the listeners, write that down. Second Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. And it says this, and I'm glad you brought this point because it's going to relate to us completely. It says this: if my people, who are God's people according to the Bible, the children of Israel. That's who we are, that's who we be. So he's specific in who he's directing this message to. The Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans that are listening to this particular podcast, we're directing this information directly to you so you can learn how to fix our communities, how to get off of drugs, how to take care of our families, how to be strong, resilient men. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves. How do you humble yourself? You go before the creator of all things and you say, you know what? I'm going to put away my foolishness, the drinking, the lies, the fornication, the adultery, the black on black crime, the thievery. That's how we humble ourselves as a nation of people. We realize what our ancestors got wrong and we go back and fix it. Okay? Humble themselves and pray. A lot of things, a lot of times people are not humble enough to acknowledge that yes, there is a creator. Yes, there is a reason why we suffer the way we suffer as a nation of people. There's a reason why we deal with generational curses as a collective is because we never acknowledged that our ancestors were the ones on Mount Sinai that said everything this Bible say we will do. You see what I'm saying? So once we realize that, we got to say, you know what? I'm going to humble myself, fix what my ancestors got wrong, and seek my face. What is seeking the face of God? Seeking the face of God is turning back to this Bible, reading it, analyzing it, studying it, just like you used to study arithmetic in school, just like you used to study the ABCs, just like you used to study politics or whatever branch of science or education that you use, just like you used to study how to run your business. Whatever you do, you have to return back to this book and say, you know what? I need to seek the face of the Most High God, my God. And then it says, and turn from their wicked ways. That goes into what we were talking about earlier, about the sobriety that needs to be placed, about the fidelity, the faithfulness. You see what I'm saying? Put away their wicked ways. Then, watch this, D. It says, then, so after we do all of that, the Most High is like, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and will heal their land. So there's hope for us as men. Our society as a nation of people won't be destroyed. If the sun fall out the sky right now, our nation will no longer exist. But since the sun, the moon, the stars still exist, there is hope for our people to get it together and get it right. The Most High says, then. Okay, so there's an action that precedes the reaction. The action is I realize that I'm God's chosen. I'm realized that I'm special and unique. I'm realized that I have a purpose as a man to lead my nation, and I'm going to do it the way the Most High tells me to do it. And by doing this, we will heal our people. The Most High says, and then will I forgive their sin and will heal their land. I hope that can some way inspire somebody.
All right, all right. So we got, and thank you again. So we have about maybe less than 15 minutes left. Okay. And like I said, I wanted to open this one up and be very specific and use a very specific gender, and that was us as men, because I believe, for the most part, we have fallen short in our duty. We have been derelict in duty in a lot of ways, and I think just acknowledging that, can put us in the mindset of, okay, well, what can I do better? First acknowledge that I'm out of step, I'm out of sorts with my creator, and I'm out of tune with myself, which is another thing. I'm definitely out of tune with myself, and I am wayward. just to be totally honest, I'm wayward. And, try to put us back into a place where we can, be in favor, with the Creator, be in favor with the God, you know. And I just think that we're at a place now where we need that more than anything else. And I'm talking about individually and I'm talking about collectively because we are hurting each other. We are hurting each other as brothers. First of all, because we don't see each other as brothers, right? Flesh in my flesh, bone in my bone. You know what I'm saying? And just like you said, you should be able to drop a stack, $1,000 in the pool of a lot of men and don't have to worry about somebody taking your money, right? Going into your home and trying to, do something with your wife or your children, right? We shouldn't have to worry about that. Unfortunately, we do live in that society where a lot of us are very predatory. We're very animalistic. We don't see the benefit, right, of actually looking into your brother and say, well, hey, maybe I'm doing something very inappropriate, but that definitely has to change. And I think for the most part, because of everything that's happening, you're talking about the weather, you're talking about these circumstances that are coming about. These things are going to make us or going to force us to look at ourselves, right? And look at your brother because at one point or another, we are going to need each other. And it is going to take us actually being very humble and very spiritual to be able to do that. Because you got to think about it. Let's just say, for instance, something comes about where a group of us has to be in one room. But the food shortage, right? You bringing people into your home, well, you got to establish some kind of law. You got to have some kind of leadership to make sure that nobody's stealing the food, nobody's stealing anything else, or nobody's doing things that's out of the sorts, right? Because you're talking about survival, and we are at a stage now where we really are at a place of survival. It's incumbent upon us to try to get ourselves in order because again you're really talking about a state of survival. But with that being said, we got about maybe 7 minutes or so left. I'm going to allow you to have the last words and then we'll go ahead and close this out.
Going back into what you just mentioned, it's heavy. That's a heavy, heavy point. I want us to consider 2005 when Hurricane Katrina occurred. And a lot of our people understood then now the importance of working together as a collective. A lot of our people understood at that moment of trial where people were on the roofs of their houses trying to just survive. People going on top of boats and traveling to distant places and knocking on doors and saying, "Hey, is everybody alive? Is everybody doing all right?" That is how we should operate in loving our neighbor as ourselves. A lot of times people think loving our neighbor means we got to love Chinese folks, we got to love white folks, we love everybody else, but then when it comes to ourselves, we lost in the source. We don't wait. Well, there's no love there. We have to come back to understanding the true meaning of what loving your neighbor is. And I'm going to read that verse. Leviticus 19 verse 17. It says this: "Thou shalt not hate thy brother," this is your own people, "thou shalt not hate thy brother in thy heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor and not suffer sin upon him." So notice what this verse just said. It correlates your brother, meaning the people of your own group, as your neighbor, right? That's what we just read. It says, don't hate your brother and don't be afraid to guide him, to instruct him, because you're operating out of love, not because you have any animosity. You want him to get it right as a man. You say, look, bro, I understand what you're going through, but I'm going to help you get it right. Verse 18 gives us the point. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people. The children of thy people. But thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So who is your neighbor according to the Most High? The children of thy people. Tell that to the black man that's shooting another black man. Tell that to another black man that's going and fornicating with another man's wife. Tell that to the black man that's not taking care of his kids. Tell that to the black man that's irresponsible in his actions. You were made to be a God. You are not made to be a nigga. You were made to be God's prince, king, and priest on the earth. With that being said, I love you enough to tell you, hey, here is how we, as a nation of people, can get it right. Love one another as you love yourself, because the Most High said it. And that's my 2 cents. Keep the change.
All right, brother. So again, we are winding down, and I thank you for coming on and giving this final piece to this question. What does God want us to bring to the table? That hopefully that piece that was missing. So for the people that are listening, for the people that will look at this podcast, video podcast, understand that we are having a dialogue. Understand that we may get some things, maybe not right. Maybe there's a different perspective out there that may uh, be utilized, right? But the fact that we're asking that question, because to be totally honest, I'm not really hearing or seeing a lot of people even ask that question. They're still on the question of what do you or what can I bring to the table, right? Nobody's really asking the question about what does God want us to bring to the table, and that's why I decided to come up with that question. And hopefully it will spark more dialogue centered around that. What does the Most High, or what does God want me to bring to the table, right? And it'll do something about the perspective that we're looking through right now, that particular lens that everybody is kind of trying to look through and say, hey, I can one up you. I don't necessarily have to bend in that direction because I got more than you, or maybe I have a degree or something like that. And I think that's immaterial at this point, talking about all of that, because to be totally honest, that can be taken away really quickly, relatively, really, really quickly. And then what are you going to say that you are bringing to the table? These things come and go. There's an ebb and a flow to it, right? So you got money, money goes. You got your degree, that may stand, but at the same time, you could end up working at Burger King or something. So you can't sit back and talk about the material possessions that you have only, solely and only, that you can bring to the table. There's got to be more substance to that question. And that's why we raised the question, what does God want me to bring to the table? Right. So with that being said, I thank you guys very much for listening at this conversation between myself and Brother Levi. I thank you again, Brother Levi, for coming on this podcast, like you do, like you have done many times. And hopefully this will not be the last time. And for those that are watching and those that may watch, remember, go and check out the recent episodes in my podcast, All Things Black Podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can find me on, again, YouTube, Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, right? And if you feel as though, compelled to give your 2 cents, make sure you leave it in the comments, right? Make sure you let us know how you were feeling about this particular episode, and we'll go from there. But above all, thank you guys for watching. Thank you again, Brother Levi. Thank the audience that was sending me questions, right? And having me deal with certain things. I definitely appreciate that. But above all, man, think about that question. What does God want me to bring to the table? And we're going to be out. Oh, before I forget, make sure you follow Brother Levi, the Forefront Express, Forefront Radio. All of his information is at the bottom underneath his name. He is also a podcaster, and you can find him on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. He's also has Twitter, and he has Instagram, right? And support Black independent media. Please do that. We need to start talking about our own narratives. I'm not of the mindset where we're going to get on here and talk about junk or berate anybody, or devalue somebody or something like that. That's not what this platform is about. So if anybody think that that's what's going to happen here, you're sadly mistaken. But yes, thank you guys for watching, and we are out.